So welcome, guys, today to our business spotlight. Today, our guest is Kiely from Drone Consultants Ireland. Ian, you're very welcome. Great to see you this morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me along.
So everyone's wondering, they hear the word drones. This is an exciting new field, which most of us probably know very little about. So let's tell our audience, what did you do and how long have you been doing it?
Well, it is exciting. Drones were very sexy for the last few years. Now it's becoming very practical. So in the early stages, we were scratching the dirt, trying to do anything to get some money in. We've been doing that was about 8 years ago, very early in the drone industry. I actually have license number 001 in Ireland. I wasn't the first to do the test, but I was the first to have the printed license given to me, which was pretty interesting. So in the early days, we did any job that was available, and we ran a drone expo to try and get the industry moving and shaking. So that kind of gave us a platform. We then kind of started doing content. We were doing mapping, inspections, and then we did a lot with the fire service, the police force. You know, in the early days, everybody was trying to find people that knew what they were talking about, and we kind of were at the tip of that spear. As time progressed, we kind of narrowed it down, and we were doing kind of a lot of the weird jobs. We won a couple of EU competitions, and we started working with the space program. So we do day-to-day flying for clients in Dublin and Ireland in general. But we also do a lot of consultancy with the European Space Agency and USPA, which is the European arm of the satellite program.
Wow, that's fairly serious. So dealing with the big boys.
Sitting with the big boys, which also has its positives and negatives.
Okay. I take it that means there's quite a bit of travel involved.
There has been, yeah. I've actually, in my old life, I was a hotel caterer and I owned like venues and stuff. And this is a completely different life. I never would have imagined I would be doing the type of stuff I'm doing. I've traveled all over the world with drones and drone conferences. I've hosted a number of conferences whereby the conference organizers would pay me to do the interviews. So that keeps me, you know, sharp as to what's going on out there and gives great contacts, and that kind of leads to more contacts. So I've had the most exciting time the last few years, really.
Fantastic. So where would you say you're finding your niche now?
So at the moment, it's kind of a bit weird because the regular drone stuff's still going on, but delivery and passenger drones are becoming so forefront. Like here in Dublin, you can have supermarket delivered by drone. And they announced yesterday that they're going to take on another area of 100,000 people beside Dublin Airport, and you will be able to order food, supermarket deliveries to your home by drone. So that's going on, and we're developing the passenger drone end of things. So we did a study in our city last year to look at how we can use satellites to monitor the drones while they're talking to each other, effectively an air traffic control for drones.
And just, I forget, maybe a stupid question. If I ordered a pair of shoes from a shopper, it might be, and it says coming by drone, how does it get there? Is somebody there on a stick guiding it to my address, or is it just all in the cloud and all you enter the address and it's automatic?
So at the moment, you use their specific app. They will have a list of shops that you can shop in. So in North Dublin, I think there's maybe 20 shops on it. Okay. Once you place the order, once the order arrives to them, you'll have it within 3 minutes. So it's pretty quick.
Yeah.
They currently, to the best of my knowledge, do have somebody monitoring each drone as it travels. So they're building on air safety and air navigation systems. So in the early stages, which it still is, it will be fully monitored, but eventually it will become autonomous. So nobody's flying the drone to you. The system is doing that, but there is somebody monitoring that.
Okay.
The drone hovers above your designated landing point at 30 meters. Cargo bay opens and down comes a little string, and it measures, it knows when it's touched the ground, and it cuts off the thread, and you have your order.
Wow, that's quite fantastic, really, isn't it?
It's pretty cool. And I've seen it, like I've sat there and watched deliveries happen and stuff. And, you know, years ago, people told me I was nuts when I talked about it. And I was talking about passenger drones in 2017, and people said, you know, you're nuts. I got abused online, and now here we are, we're doing it.
Yeah. It's quite phenomenal. So for you, where do you see the future for you in this now, in your niche market?
So for the last, since 2018, myself and my colleagues with international consortiums, we've been developing technologies that will help this work. So navigation systems that are aircraft quality, but small enough to fit in a drone, and that use small amounts of power so that and you know where the drone is, what velocity it's at. So we've been working on stuff like that for a couple of years. And ultimately, the entire drone process will become automated. So the type of weird flying jobs or the content creation or the mapping that I'm doing now will eventually all become automated. So I'm trying to position myself to be in a future world where this is happening autonomously.
Okay, so that means that your clients will become, is it going to be the agencies? Is it going to be the big players who want someone to manage this process for them? Or how will you
Yeah, it'll be
monetize?
more than likely B2B. So we'll be providing
Yeah.
some systems to the drone companies or the drone service providers.
Okay.
In Europe, we have had new legislation for about 18 months, and they're enacting new pieces as we go along to facilitate this. But somewhat like in the early days of flying, we were making it up as we went along. Then they gave us some laws. Ireland was the first country in the world to have some laws. And now the original laws are about 10 pages. The short notes on the current laws are 410 pages and growing. And they keep giving us new direction. And we're like, oh, I've got to go and learn all that again. So it's about trying to keep on top of that and try and figure out ways, well, how can we situate ourselves in that and make it viable?
And do you see yourself more being in a European context, global context, or are you going to concentrate on Ireland initially?
That's a really good question. I've been thinking that myself the last couple of weeks. I have aspirations to do a couple of things here in Ireland. But realistically speaking, because our legislation is coming from EASA, which is the European Aviation Safety Authority, any kind of long-term decisions we make will have to be reflective of that. So we would potentially be looking at clients across Europe.
Okay. So presumably this isn't free. Presumably this costs money to put together.
Yes.
So do you physically need to investment in the drones, or is it mainly in the background process stuff that you're focusing on?
Well, so I've been providing half of my time I used to fly to make money and do consulting, and the other half of my time I used to develop ideas. We've had quite a few grants in different consortiums, and ourselves have been working together with EU grants. And then my own company, we've had a few grants from the Irish government, whereby we would be contributing 30% to that grant. So for every 100,000 euros we get, we're actually putting 30,000 to that.
Okay.
So it's kind of a bit of a juggling act.
Sure.
If I had known what I know now 10 years ago, would I have taken this route? I don't know. I've spent a lot of my own money.
Yeah, but I think presumably we're still at the early adopter stage in this process. And it's good, the bell curve, it's going to happen sooner rather than later once all the laws are passed and that sort of thing. And also, I'm kind of excited about saying, I wonder if I can order by a drone, and just seeing it happen, because I mean, it's new, but I'd be kind of interested. But the big saving from me as a client or a customer, I don't have to drive anywhere.
Yes.
You know, so, and oh yeah, pickup points. I don't have to pick up anything up, it just arrives.
Well, a couple of good things for you. I saw your address when you emailed me. So
yeah.
the landscape of where you live is actually quite conducive to having drone delivery. So having it in the city center or beside it or right on top of an airport's not good, but where you live, actually probably not that far away.
Okay, very good. Well, I should look forward to that. So tell me, Ian, what do you see then as the biggest challenges you may face in the next, say, 5 years?
Well, you said a minute ago about the bell curve. There's been several so far because you have the hobbyist stuff. So there are different challenges as we progress. So I think each country is adopting the same legislation, but each country has wiggle room to kind of shape it to suit their own needs. Ireland's quite open in that we've lots of open airspace that's not considered controlled. Okay. But there's going to be loads of issues, safety, public perception. Even if you come up with an idea that resolves loads of issues for loads of countries, it's actually getting those countries to adopt it. So you somewhat need to get the EU to look at your idea and adopt it, and then make that a baseline. So the paperwork is going to be an issue, and then taking your idea, like in France, there's loads of military airspace. London is completely congested with overlaying airspaces for different airports. So they're all going to be issues. So where do you focus? So figuring out where to focus, where the low-hanging fruit is, these are all issues that change in each country.
Okay.
Go on.
So there's obviously a lot of different markets. So you see people taking video content, okay, for estate agents and stuff like that. Okay, that's one particular market. And you might say, Tom, that's fairly basic stuff. Then you move into the delivery of a product or a good up to a certain weight, presumably. And you say, okay, there's a big market in that. So that's going to be probably the biggest growth area. And then maybe you have your bigger scale stuff where you're working with the government agencies in Europe and abroad, etc., whereby you're doing maybe more, how can I put it, scanning using satellites and everything else and linking them to the drones and that sort of thing. Is that where the big stuff is?
Yeah, well, like for instance, some of the motorways now are, when they're rebuilding them, they're scanning them by drone. Some of those jobs are 20 kilometers long. So that is already happening. We have all these different layers happening at the same time. Relatively easy if you close a road to get permission to map it. If it's an open road, you need a very specific type of license and very specific type of craft. So they're now developing craft with safety systems to do that type of stuff. But the craft they're building to do deliveries, they're airline quality craft. So they're like helicopters or airplanes. So keeping those at that standard is a lot of work. Choosing which area to focus on and pursue is a big question. And go on.
So therefore, for you, for the client, can you give us an example now of a midterm client? You could describe the midterm client. What would they be looking for? And indeed, who might you ask the audience here? Who would you like to speak to?
Oh, interesting. So some of my midterm clients are marketing companies, and because I have a special license, I can go make content in lots of places they wouldn't be able to go and make it. And there's mapping companies that I work with, and again, I have a special license, so they will bring us in to do all the licensing and do the flying. Excellent. But the type of people I want to talk to are the people that have a scalable model of drone usage. Scalable model. That we're going to need it on an ongoing basis. You know, if you're doing complex jobs, it's not necessarily worth your while to maintain a license, insurance, and a drone team. So it makes sense to bring us in, the specialists, to do all of that. In the early stages, everybody ran out and bought a drone, and they were all doing mad stuff, and now they're all getting a slap on the wrist. And that, a lot of that's disappeared off the internet now.
Right. So they've got to have kind of a plan of what they want to deliver for their customers, clients, whoever they may be. If you can see a use value case of that, you can say, well, hey, we can handle all this stuff for you in the background. So you're an outsourced.
Somewhat. Like there are councils with drones, and they're doing X amount of work, building inspections and stuff like that. But then they would still hire us in to do the complex stuff. Like at Halloween every year, we monitor. So there are bunches of kids in the city that compete for large bonfires, and the kids steal pallets and tires, and they collect them by the thousands. But they burnt a few houses down, and they undermined a building a few years ago by storing under a building. So we're now tracking those materials and using the police and the fire service to go in and reclaim them.
Wow. And again, coming back to this again, my simple brain won't work this out. Somebody has to fly these things, or is this again?
No, in that instance, that's me flying.
Okay.
I'm physically flying the drone. We're getting intel from all these other government bodies saying we think there's stuff here. They're using canals to move the stuff. They're using railway lines in the middle of the night. They're putting themselves at great danger. A few years ago, they started tracking us on Facebook, and then they bought their own drone and were tracking our drone, and they were moving the stuff after we searched an area, and we're like playing cat and mouse across a city of 1.5 million people. And these kids have nothing better to do with their time but think about ways of undermining what we're doing. And I'm talking to the police and the fire service. I'm like, going, you guys pay me for this. Like, I'd almost do this for free. I'm having so much fun.
Listen, it sounds really interesting. I could talk to you all day about this. One last question. Can I just ask you, what advice would you give to a business owner if you were starting all over again?
If I was starting drones all over again?
Everything, yeah.
Don't try and grab too much. You know, get really good at 2 or 3 things, and then use those kind of to focus your way up. I mean, it depends on what you want out of it too. Like myself and my colleagues, we've done loads of stuff that's garnered media attention. That's been a lot of fun, but it's actually not the focus of our business. And the focus of our business was solving problems and trying to come up with solutions. And whilst we've enjoyed that, we've traveled the world and whatnot, at the end of the day, that's not really scalable unless you pick one or two of those ideas and bring them to fruition.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
the last 4 or 5 years, that's what we've been really focused on, bringing those ideas to fruition.
Very good. So the people, if there's anybody in the audience listening here, I'd like to talk to people who are looking for assistance to be provided to a B2B sort of scenario. Anybody in marketing who's got a marketing idea, you'd be happy to talk about where drones might be the thing, and for mapping, and then also for some of the bigger ticket stuff, if anyone's got connections in those fields.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we're very good at solving problems.
Very good. And if somebody wants to contact you, Ian, the best form of contact would be?
You can contact me on LinkedIn, or you can email me at ik@droneconsultantsireland.ie.
Okay, so that's Ian on LinkedIn, and also Ian at, ik@droneconsultantsireland.ie. Ian, thank you so much for your time today. I genuinely I find this area really interesting. I'm a bit of a techie myself, even though I know nothing about it, but I love tech. But look, thank you so much for your input today. Really appreciate talking to you, and I wish you every success in your venture.
Thanks, Tom. Much appreciated.